Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. Ukraine, this is a US elections special update. I'm going to go through, I think, some rally excerpts and get a sense of, what's being said, how people are operating on the campaign trail, and probably go to the polls, leave out the news one and do that separately, because otherwise this is going to be a massive video. I've got so much to do. It's been a long time since I've given you a synopsis right around the houses concerning what is being said. So we're going to start with a little bit of an insight from some campaign rallies. And remember, just to remind you, we're talking about not the people are super ensconced in the MAGA worldview or the Democrat worldview. They are going to vote for their own people, and no matter what happens, the whole Trumpian claim that I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and still get a vote. Yeah, absolutely. So we're not talking about you. We're talking about the people in the middle, the undecided. There are still many of these. And undecided could also be about deciding whether to get out and vote. Yeah, I'm probably going to vote Democrat or I'm probably going to vote Republican, but I'm undecided as to whether I can be bothered to get out of my house and go and vote physically, or to whether I can be bothered to apply for a vote by mail or whatever. So there are different ways to understand undecided, but it's those undecided and independents and swing voters in the middle. How are they going to operate? Who is doing a better job of taking those across to their side? Because that is what will I think eventually decide this election. We're going to hear now a number of things that Trump has said in a number of his rallies. And again, the question is, who is this appealing to? Is he doing a good job of enthusing the audience? Is he doing a good job of appealing to those centre voters, to the different demographics that he needs to get to win over? Is he presenting a unified front, or is he presenting a divisive front where he's dividing the nation?
Kamala is mentally impaired. If a Republican did what she did, if a Republican did what she did, that Republican would be impeached and removed from office, and rightfully so, for high crimes and misdemeanors. Joe Biden became mentally impaired. Kamala was born that way.
So it appears gone are the days where, and this is why people were quite refreshed by the vice presidential debate, because this is not what J.D. Vance even, although he's gone back to being a bit insulting straight after the debate of Tim Walz. But J.D. Vance and Tim Walz had a pretty cordial exchange. And people looked at that and said, right, okay, I remember how we do things. And then you have this kind of really juvenile approach to politics, whereby you just, she's mentally impaired and she's been that way since birth. She's achieved intellectually far more. Like you line up the books that man's read and the books she's read. Not that that's the be all and end all of intellectuality, intelligence. But she has read a lot more books. Has, I assume, better qualifications than he has. He was, I think, labelled as the worst student he'd ever had. Was that not the lecturer at Wharton College or wherever? Like he has taken on businesses, but then they've gone bankrupt, and Forbes has written that he would have earned more money had he just stuck that inheritance into the S&P 500. She has become an attorney general. It's clearly not correct that she's dumb as a rock, or whatever he said previously, dumb as a box of rocks, and here mentally impaired. It's incredibly divisive. It's juvenile. It's just unhelpful rhetoric, and it's simply not true, and potentially it's just projection.
She was born that way. And if you think about it, only a mentally disabled person could have allowed this to happen to our country. Anybody would know this.
So she's mentally impaired, mentally disabled. I mean, we teach our children not to say stuff like this for a reason, because when you say stuff like this, you are showing yourself to be a bit of a bully and a not very nice human being. Well, that is who he is.
There's something wrong with Kamala, and I just don't know what it is, but there is definitely something missing. And you know what? Everybody knows it. She's a stupid person. Stupid person. I don't care. I don't. If they didn't cheat, I wouldn't even be here today. You know why? I wouldn't have to campaign. I'm here only because they cheat. And they cheat in this state, especially in Philadelphia. And I mentioned a couple other areas, but for the most part, but Philadelphia is out of control. Detroit is out of control. Atlanta is out of control. Places are out of control, because if there was no cheating, if God came down from a high and said, I am going to be your vote tabulator for this election, I would leave this podium right now because I wouldn't have to speak. We wouldn't have any problem. We have to have a landslide because they
What are you talking about?
cheat so damn much. If we win and when we win, we're going to prosecute people that cheat on this election.
Now, this is all very interesting because if you realise what's going on, we have heard the Jack Smith evidence coming out in the case to do with, whether the election was, what happened after the election finished in 2020, and you had January the 6th, and you had, because of the immunity, the changes to presidential immunity that were brought on by the Supreme Court, and this wasn't an October surprise. This wasn't something that was waiting to happen in October. What happened is the immunity rules changed the way that court case was going to take place, and they had to re-establish what the evidence they could submit was, and then submit that to the Judge Chutkin, and see, where we're at now. So they've done that, and this is a time where it has now come into the public light. You've got the unsealed evidence that is being presented in the case. It's a bit of a shot in the foot for the Republicans, or for Trump, whereby the immunity ruling is great, but it has now enforced this situation whereby evidence is in the public domain as to what took place in and around January the 6th. And that evidence is not good for Trump. Indeed, it is incredibly damning. Was it Weissman, one of the legal experts on the news channel, was saying it's bombshell after bombshell. Every page is like, oh my goodness. And it just shows you who Trump was with regard to cheating and criminality concerning the election, and basically admitting up front that we're not going to concede the election, irrespective of what the results were. So.
And if we can, we'll go back to the last one, too, if we're allowed. But we're going to prosecute people, so at least they know that's going to happen. These are smart people. They're not so stupid, but they have to be taught. Now, if you had one really violent day, like a guy like Mike Kelly, put him in charge, Congressman Kelly, put him in charge.
So this is where he's going to advocate for the kind of horror film, The Purge, and all that series of films where you have one day a year where you can just go around killing people and blah, blah, blah. It's this like violent permission to take out criminals.
For one day. Mike, would you say, he's right here, he's a great congressman. Would you say, Mike, that if you were in charge, you would say, oh, please, don't touch them. Let them rob your store. All these stores go out of business, right? They don't pay rent. The city doesn't have money. It's a chain of events that's so bad. One rough hour, and I mean real rough, the word will get out, and it will end immediately. It'll end immediately. The majority of the school cannot speak English. In Ohio, Springfield, they can't speak English. They're taking over the schools. There's nobody that can speak English. And the mayor's looking for interpreters. Isn't that one?
So we're going hard on fear, and we're going hard on division, and really leaning into that whole approach of fear rather than joy and unity. And he's hoping that's, from it, without casting any kind of moral valuation over this, that is the campaign strategy, it appears. whether his strategists want him to say this as much as he does on stage, he is going hard on fear.
Wonderful. How can this happen? Remember, there's a hat that's made that sells like crazy. Oh, there's a fly. Oh, I wonder where the fly came from. See, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have had a fly up here. You're changing rapidly, but we can't take it any longer.
2 years ago.
So there you go. That's the sort of thing that he's saying at these rallies. Interesting exchange here with someone a surrogate who is sent to kind of defend him, and you get into exchanges like this.
So according to those gentlemen there, saying that Trump is a threat to democracy is violent rhetoric, but Trump saying, let's just have one really violent day, that is not violent rhetoric?
No, he didn't say one violent day. That's not even
Trump
what he said. But let's be honest about what he actually said.
Can we
play
play
it again.
Trump
Play it again, because he didn't even say that. But go ahead.
Can we play it again?
I want to hear it.
All these stores go out of business, right? They don't pay rent. The city doesn't have money. It's a chain of events that's so bad. One rough hour, and I mean real rough, the word will get out and it will end immediately. End immediately. You know?
How is that not violent rhetoric?
We have to acknowledge the reality going on in every city in America.
Not answering the
Crime
question.
is
Not answering the question.
That is answering the question.
How
Because
is
the reality in America, hold on, Keith, the reality in America is that crime is massively up.
Crime is not massively
Yes,
up.
it
That's
is.
a lie.
You can bang the table all you want, but
You're
that's not
lying,
true,
Congressman.
Keith.
You're lying.
We are.
And I like this, right? This is just a big slagging match, right? But it's not. Actually, it's someone saying, I am exasperated, you are lying, and I'm fed up of people lying outright. We've got the FBI figures that you've tried to diss, but actually they are improved figures, and from not only in the kind of trends, but improved in the way that they are now representing more of the cities in the US than previous FBI figures did. And crime has fallen across all of these different domains.
We already know that there
The
are cities
FBI just released data this week that crime is going down.
We already know that.
Oh my God! Abby, why do you let this man lie on your national
I'm
television
not lying.
like
I'm telling you the
this?
exact
This is not
truth.
right.
You may not
You're a
want.
liar,
You may not.
Congressman.
No, I'm
You're
not.
lying.
Because you're lying to the American people
If
now.
you would let
And
me
so I want to be
talk,
respectful of what you're trying to say.
Hang on a second. If you would just let me talk.
And it's funny, like, you're lying. No, you're lying to the American people. Well, I'm lying by saying that you're lying. How's that a lie? Like, you know, he hasn't got a leg to stand on, this guy, because A, it was violent rhetoric, and B, crimes are going down, and so his justification for the violent rhetoric is false.
I will explain exactly what you want me to explain. We have the data. The FBI literally put out data today showing that crime is down this year for the first 6 months of the year. But look at the trend.
And there you go. And the trend line, and we've discussed that before, but, you know, you get people rolled out to try and defend what Trump says, and it seems insane.
And let's level set.
And then, so, okay, what I want to do is say, right, so that's Trump's approach, which is division and fear. But also, if you listen to his rallies, A, they're smaller. There are people releasing pictures of often much smaller venues. And then his excuse is that he's because the government won't, like Kamala Harris, won't allow him the protection he needs. He has to go to smaller venues. It's like, really? Okay. But also just the energy levels. So Trump is being accused of sort of having to lean over much more. He can't even hold his body up. He's speaking really quietly. He's not like bombastically getting, even if you are going to talk about fear, just from an energy level, he's not getting people enthused. And quite often I've heard a number of his rallies where there's been almost like just pin drop silence behind while he's talking, or after he finishes sentences, where you should be getting like much greater cheers, or at least it's very muted. And this is a data point to suggest that there's a lack of enthusiasm around much of what he's saying at the moment. And the comparison here, when you're talking about unity and enthusiasm, is just chalk and cheese.
We are the underdog. We are the underdog, and we have some hard work ahead. But here's the thing. We like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work is good work. with your help, we will win in November. Yes, we will. Yes, we will.
And there's a thing that's happening. Like, I just caught myself smiling. Like I am caught up with that, with the positivity of seeing her smile physically. Like, the mirror neurons in my brain are firing. So, like, this is how intersubjectivity works and empathy. Like, I feel like I'm her. And so when she smiles, I smile. Like when you start like wanting to cry when you see other people cry. It's mirror neurons firing where your brain is putting yourself in that other person's body. So when you have this sense of passion that she's engendering here, that she's showing, you can't help but feel drawn alongside her, being drawn along with her here. Whereas when Trump is just that low kind of like, and she's just mentally impaired and blah, 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 like, you're thinking, oh yeah, okay, you know, I'm not enthused, and I'm not going to go out and tell all my friends, oh, I just went to this amazing rally. You've got to go next time. We're going to go, or you've got to vote for her. She's like totally like the place just came alive, and that enthusiasm doesn't spread like a contagion. When I look at the Trump rallies, I don't get that sense.
Yes, we will. We will win.
So on and so forth. So that whole speech, I forget where it was a few days ago now, in Las Vegas, Nevada. So that whole speech was a really very good speech. It was just a well-tailored speech that ended up with like loads of unifying talk. And there is just a stark difference between this kind of narrative of division and narrative of unity. And then like here you get, what's going on here about this? Looks like dictatorial pro-censorship speech. Like, the left always gets attacked by the right for like being pro-censorship and so on and so forth. Listen to what Trump has said about press, kind of being the enemy of the people. He's always having a go at the press that's holding him to account, and he's often talked about wanting to regulate the press.
Then I have to sit there and listen to her bullshit last night.
So negative. It's like, it's not about what sense of vision do I have for you. Let's have this positive sense of where the country is going. Let's bring you along with me. Yay! It's like, oh, I have to listen to her BS.
And who puts it on? Fox News. And they shouldn't be allowed to put it on. It's all lies. It's all lies. Everything that I have.
So he's having a go at Fox News for even daring to air what Kamala Harris has said. He sees Fox News as his arm, as his propaganda arm. They should not be allowed to do that. Again, advocating for some form of censorship here. And yes. So then we have the issue that Trump has with regard to crowd sizes that is often talked about. And then this is not the only time. We've seen loads of videos that have been released by the Harris campaign of people leaving behind Trump, like coming down the stairs and leaving in the middle of the rally. He now knows, because it's been said in debate and it's been mentioned to him, about having small crowd sizes where people are tired and exhausted and just bored and want to leave. And that has triggered him. As Will Stansel here says, Harris planted this in his head at the debate. And predictably, it'll torment his ego for the rest of his life.
I want to explain something. The people that you see leaving, because nobody ever leaves.
So there are people leaving at the back of the audience. And he's saying, the people who are leaving because nobody ever, of course they can't. So he's already contradicting. Those people that are leaving, they can't be leaving.
I want to explain something. The people that you see leaving, because nobody ever leaves. And when they do, I finish up quick, believe me. But I couldn't take pictures at the beginning. So I take them at the end sometimes. If I'm late, the plane gets late, you get delayed, lots of things happen. There's a little hurricane going on in Florida, as you know. And
by the way, that's been picked up as being really dismissive of that hurricane. There's this little hurricane going on, as you know.
Florida, as you know. And so what they do is they say, oh, please come up now at the end of my speech. I said, don't do that. because it looks like they're leaving, like your husband who owns this place.
Anyway, I don't really understand what he's talking about, but he keeps coming up with these excuses to why people are leaving his campaigns early, and of course, it's just a load of nonsense. They are leaving. Okay, right. Going back to the more divisive rhetoric that we've heard a lot of.
But Kamala should have closed the border years ago, and we wouldn't have hostile takeovers of Springfield, Ohio, Aurora, Colorado, where they're actually going in with massive machine gun type equipment. They're going in with guns that are beyond even military scope. And
that is not true. I report on the Ukraine war consistently. Like, we can talk about guns that are even beyond military scope. I don't know what that means. What would a gun beyond military scope be? What a gun that's even too destructive to be used by the military? Yet that's what these people in Aurora are, supposedly. I think this is reference to the Venezuelan gangs that have AK-47s. That in another speech he called MK-47 says, "I know everything about guns. I know a lot about guns. I had to go, these are MK-47s," which is, yeah, you don't know anything about guns, mate. And here, these are machine gun type equipment, guns that are even beyond military scope.
And they're taking over apartment buildings. They're taking over real estate. They're in the real estate development business. Congratulations. These are, in that case, people from Venezuela, young street gang members that were sent here by the Venezuelan government.
Which is a lie. They've not been. There's no evidence for this at all. So, just like if you listen to this guy and you're still going to vote for him, you think, yeah, this is my man. This is my man. Oh, he's so good. He's so clever. Then I'd question your sensibilities here. Now, he's standing in front of a sign that says jobs, jobs, jobs there. That's something we're going to talk about a little bit later. Really interesting observation of actually how not very clever his campaign is. But we'll get onto that. Just remember that. Park that jobs, jobs, jobs bit there.
Biden became mentally impaired. Kamala was born that way.
Okay, so this is, again, that excerpt where he's talking about that. Mentally disabled, born that way. And then Bill Kristol, former Republican, saying he's a really disgusting human being. Like, what do you think of him saying stuff like this? And then he's called out on it, right? Why insult her intelligence?
Why insult her intelligence?
Well, I have to do that. Well, I don't think she's a very bright person. I do feel that. I mean, I think that's right. I think I am a very bright person. And a lot of people say that. I don't think she's a very bright person. And you know what? Our country needs a very smart person. And I don't think she's a very smart person. So I'm not...
Says the man who just can't think straight, so he just repeats the same little mantra time and just over and over in the same... Like, listen to him repeat himself in this interview and ask yourself, who is more intelligent, you or Kamala Harris? Like, who has a finer grasp of the details of policy, you or Kamala Harris? I know everything then you need to know about guns, like MK-47.
Why insult her intelligence?
Well, I have to do that. Well, I don't think she's a very bright person. I do feel that. I mean, I think that's right. I think I am a very bright person. And a lot of people say that. I don't think she's a very bright person. And you know what? Our country needs a very smart person. And I don't think she's a very smart person. So I'm not looking to... I don't consider that an insult. That's just a fact.
Why insult her?
I could come up with any insult of you, Trump, and state that as a fact. Probably be far more justified than you are there, to be perfectly frank. Just, yeah, like, it's like there's a pea just flying around in his skull, just pinging off the interior, and that's it. And of course, because he's so intelligent, he, lots of people tell him he's intelligent. He knows everything about, all you need to know about guns, and he knows all you need to know about technology. For example,
Immigrants, they have a phone app so that people can come into our country. These are smart immigrants, I guess, because most people don't have any idea what the hell a phone app is. But they do. These are very intelligent immigrants. But you know who they're immigrants?
What's the actual? They must be really intelligent because most people don't know what a phone app is. Honestly, just... If you're going to vote for this guy, like, what do you think? Right, there must be a couple of you out there that are still going to vote Trump. What do you think when you hear all of this? With him insulting Kamala Harris for being mentally impaired and mentally disabled, and she's not very bright. And I'm bright because people tell me I'm bright. I must be bright because, and then whinging about crowd sizes, and then etc., and then talking about MK-47s instead of AK-47s, and lying about pretty much everything, and then saying, and they must be intelligent because not most people don't know what the hell a phone app is. Oh, what do you think when you hear that? Anyway, let's continue.
That seemed to be the documents case. I had every right to have them, called the Presidential Records Act. That's what they passed it for. But he didn't.
So here he's talking about the documents case and said they passed that so that I could keep hold of documents in my shower, in my toilet in Mar-a-Lago. You remember the stacks of documents? I think that, to me, is the most egregious of all of the cases still going on. I think that's deeply, deeply problematic. And there's all sorts of issues surrounding that. Now, he seems to think the documents case, the documents like law, the Presidential Records Act, was made so that he could do that, rather than being made in order to stop you doing it. It just blows my mind. And then we have another pretty divisive statement, but worth understanding some context here.
Maybe that's a Marxist thing. I don't know. And where is her father? I'd love to speak to him. I'd love to speak to him because nobody's heard from him. But I would like to speak to him. Maybe that's a
So, okay, Alex Cole here says Kamala's father was the first black award-winning scholar to receive tenure at Stanford's economic department. And Donald Trump's father was arrested at a KKK rally and refused to rent to black people. Now, I don't know if you all know this. It's well worth looking into. Oops, no, not that one. Into the past of Donald Trump's father, who was indeed arrested at a KKK rally way back when. And indeed, you can find the original newspaper article to talk about that, and indeed famous for not wanting to rent property to black people, etc., etc. So, it's really difficult to listen to him talk about Kamala Harris's father without admitting the truth of his own father. So here, the New York, this is the original newspaper article from way back when. New Yorker owner of an apartment project in Seat Pleasant was arrested in Prince George's County yesterday for not complying with 5 citations for housing code violations filed against the project 9 months ago. Fred C. Trump, 70, was taken into custody, blah, 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 blah. Bennett said that in the case of Trump's apartment complex, however, so much money and so many inspector man-hours were spent in an unsuccessful effort to have what are everyday problems corrected, etc., etc. So that was him getting arrested for the issue to do with rental apartments and whatnot. But he was arrested in 1927 during a Ku Klux Klan riot, and then 1976 over code violations at a building owned in Maryland. In the first case, so that's a transcription of that latter case. This one that is the newspaper article from the KKK event. So seen as police and Klan clash at Queen's Parade. And anyway, this was not Fred Trump's first arrest. 49 years early, in 1927, he was arrested at a Ku Klux Klan rally that turned violent at Queens on a charge of refusing to disperse from a parade when ordered to do so. According to a newspaper report at the time, he was 21 at the time of his arrest. His son Donald would not have been born for another 19 years. And then you can see the newspaper report there. Anyway, yeah, it's worth knowing these things, particularly if you had not previously been made aware of Trump's father's background. So when you see him talk so divisively about immigration and understand that his father was arrested for not dispersing at a KKK event, then and Trump's newspaper advert he took out at the time of these Central Park Five that was really, really deeply problematic in the context of racism, you join these dots together and you think, yeah, again, is this a unifying figure to have as president of the USA, representing everyone? I don't know, but there you go. Okay. Going back to attacking mental deterioration again.
Disgusting illegal alien who was led into the United States by Kamala and her lax law. Every one of my killer. We had the great. He would have never been able to get in.
Right, and I said this in my previous video on the topic. Like, if Biden had spoken like this, or Kamala Harris spoke like this, they would be accused of. Biden would have been done for like dementia and everything. We would have been excoriated by Fox and Newsmax and OAN. Here we've got Biden slurring, real low energy, no one whooping and hollering here. And listen to the syntax of his speech here.
By Kamala and her lax law. Every one of my killer. We had the great. He would have never been able to get in. Lax law. Every one of my killer. We had the great. He would have never been able to get in. She stopped every single one of them. She was the border czar. Now she doesn't admit that. Whether you call her a czar or not, she was no czar because she really wasn't a czar. She didn't give disgusting.
So, Biden's mental deterioration in my books doesn't have anything on that. And then, of course,
Biden became mentally impaired. Kamala was born that way.
So again, just to remind you that Biden was mentally impaired and Kamala Harris was born that way. Yet he apparently is, really bright, even though he can barely put any sentences together on very frequent occasions. And then here's the idea that the level of enthusiasm at his rallies is just fairly low.
There is no, and I say it all the time, if you wanted to do a movie on some of these people that you're going to be looking at in 2 minutes, if you wanted to do a movie, there's no actor in Hollywood that could play the role. There's nobody that could do it. These actors, they're a little bit shaky. They can't play the role. They bring in a big actor and you look, you say, oh, he's got no muscle content. He's got no muscle. We need a little muscle. Then they bring in another one. But he's got a weak face. He looks weak. No, these guys have the whole package. Unfortunately for our country. I watched one of them.
What the hell is he talking about? Like, as if there's no actor that can play. I think he's saying that these immigrants that are coming in are really so strong that you couldn't find an actor to play such a person. It's just weird and nonsensical on so many levels. But also, people are nonplussed and thinking, what the hell are you talking about? And they're not enthused by this weird tangent.
There's nobody that could do it. These actors, they're a little bit shaky. They can't play the role. They bring in a big actor and you look, you say, oh, he's got no muscle content. He's got no muscle. We need a little muscle. Then they bring in another one. But he's got a weak face. He looks weak. No, these guys have the whole package. Unfortunately for our country. I watched one of them shouting at a judge, I kill you. I kill you when I get out. I kill you. And, the judge is like, oh, he's never heard this stuff. And even the guards, they want to look for a new job themselves. I kill you.
And then compare that to what we heard Kamala Harris, like giving a cogent vision. She's reading off a script because, that's how you get a coherent sense of what you are presenting to the country, rather than some rambling mess of ideas spliced with half-baked nonsense. And that is your Trump campaign compared to your Harris campaign. And I just don't think he's going the right way about attracting as many votes as he needs. And then he's consistently confusing things and people. Here he confuses Kim Jong-un with the president of Iran.
Washington would not get us. They said that we have to guard the United Nations, which meant the president of
North Korea, who's basically trying to kill me.
That's
so they
Iran.
want to guard him, but they don't want to guard me. So we're going to start having it out with them because we've sort of have it. Washington.
And it's probably quite important that you get the right country in who you are planning to take out or whatever. You get that country right. So, yeah, it's just incredible.
He's failing at the former. In fact, he's so desperate that he's now mumbling unintelligibly about how migrants are so strong there are no actors who could play them in movies or something. See if you can make sense of any of this. Even his audience seems completely baffled.
So I already played you that clip, as we just heard. So he then plays it again. And it's just, this is just ammunition for comedy gold and whatnot.
Fortunately for our country.
Either he's finally lost his mind or his speechwriters are also big Mets fans. Also, word just in, Mets won.
Referring to a previous joke.
Believe it. Truly can't believe it. Sal already left. It's weird. Trump almost sounds jealous of these guys he's describing. These guys have the whole package: rippling biceps, strong jawline, very charismatic, winning personalities. They'll sweep you off your feet. And unfortunately for our country, they have terrific beach bodies. I mean, this guy's mind is just fully gone, right? Like, what was he even saying here?
You look, you say, oh, he's got no muscle content. He's got no muscle. We need a little muscle. Then they bring in another one, but he's got a weak face.
A weak face and no muscle content. What are you talking? You sound like a 19th century farmer recounting an alien abduction. They had me on a metal slab, fully naked, examining my body, poking and prodding. They said they were examining my muscle content, told me I had a weak face, and then they dumped me out in a cornfield. But according to Trump, these migrants aren't just strong, they're also smart because they have phones. I think, again, I can't follow. See if you can.
In addition, she's allowing virtually unlimited.
And then he goes on to do the whole phone app thing. So, the point being that if your rallies, if the so much content of your rallies is ammunition for comedians to just take the absolute rip out of you, then you're probably not delivering the right kind of content. You know, Kamala Harris, you can't take excerpts of what she said and turn into overt comedy because they're so crazy, nonsensical bonkers. That doesn't happen because they're carefully scripted and they're on point and they do a job. But for him, he is providing ammunition for comedians because what he says is absolute nuts. Okay, now going back to the jobs thing that he's standing in front of, just some subtle criticisms here that I think are or nuanced criticisms here that I think are on point.
I'm not sure. We can stipulate that Donald Trump's campaign is better in 2024 than it was the other two times, but I don't think it's that good.
Yeah.
Just think about this is the smallest point on this, but this is the kind of stuff that I obsess over. Why is he speaking in front of a banner that says jobs, jobs, jobs?
Because someone in the campaign knows that that's the better message.
Well, yes, but even if, let's say you're just doing an economic event, the unemployment rate's at a historic low. When you look at all this,
you could say
polling
like
on
prices, cost.
Yeah, exactly. It's just concerns about jobs are way down because the unemployment rate's at a historic low. So
this is a really important point. Like, you've got a campaign strategy that's going right. You're gonna be doing this, speaking at this event. You're gonna be talking about the economy, and we're gonna put you in front of a jobs banner. But no one's thoughts is no one cares about jobs at the moment. Literally, unemployment is at record lows. Like, this is not a concern. People are concerned about prices, so it should be about inflation, or price, getting on top of prices. Somehow, that's what you want to communicate. You're saying the wrong things to speak to the audience in a way that they should be concerned or interested about. This it's just schoolboy stuff.
Prices, wages, there are all these other things, lower taxes, all those things. And so you pick jobs. It's just very amateur, is what I'd say.
Well, let me tell you, if you thought that event was weird.
Yeah, and so, these guys just go on and pick more excerpts out. It's just incredible. So then I want to go back to this idea of unity versus division. So you've seen a lot of division, real divisive topics and claims from Donald Trump. And I haven't played you in this video, but I did the previous video where he's saying that these immigrants are coming into your kitchens to slit your throat, which is just incredibly divisive rhetoric. And then you've got on the other side, for really obvious strategic reasons, trying to unite the country, trying to get a broad tent coalition whereby you're giving a permission structure to Republicans to come and vote for you. You had 7 Republicans speaking at DNC. You are consistently trying to get endorsements of Republicans, and they are doing that really successfully. And you've got Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, here talking very eloquently on this.
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's really important that people understand that you're going to be a governor, or in Kamala Harris's case, a president, for all Pennsylvanians, for all Americans. And I think one of the most important ways we do that is by showing that we have support from rural, urban, suburban communities, men and women, people of all colors, people who come from all different places, and, of course, people from different political parties. I think at a time where we've become so polarized politically, showing that you can reach across the aisle and not just attract someone's support in an election, but that you can govern in a way that keeps them as part of an inclusive coalition, something we've been able to do here in Pennsylvania.
So consistently talking about an inclusive coalition of people reaching across the aisle. He's talking about working with Republicans. And I have Micah Rizzuti, who just comes on my threads and splurges basically MAGA oh dear, what's going on there? Splurging MAGA talking points and propaganda. He says this. And it's just weird projection. Kamala Harris is not unifying anything. She is deeply divisive. And she's not divisive. She's literally, like, the whole theme of her campaign is to not be divisive, is to attract the centre ground, the undecideds, the independents, and the Republicans, the disaffected Republicans and Reagan Republicans, to the point where Josh Shapiro is talking about how to work as effectively as possible with Republicans.
I think that's critically important. I also think it's important that we understand that we don't have to agree with an elected official on every single issue to vote for them, because we want people who are honorable. We want people who, as I talked about before, pass that basic test we set for our children of loving thy neighbor. We want someone who actually gives a damn about all of us, not just focused on themselves. Someone who's trying to lift up communities, not tear them down. There's a clear...
I don't know how you can sit there and with a straight face saying Kamala Harris is deeply divisive and think that Donald Trump isn't. Like, the two visions are so diametrically opposed.
Contrast in this race, and I think the more Kamala Harris can lean on people who maybe historically wouldn't have considered voting for a Democrat but are now, I think that's really, really powerful. And it's something I've done here in Pennsylvania. It's something I would encourage her to continue to do here in the Commonwealth and across the country.
What is it?
So I think that was really important. Now, the question is, can you turn vibes, so the enthusiasm, into votes? Can you turn unity into votes? And when we look at the polls are still holding pretty steady for Kamala Harris. She's 2.8 up on the 538 aggregates average polls. So that is suggesting that she's got a decent enough lead, but 2.8 is not safe for her. So from a national lead, and I spoke about this with Dave Trotter on my live the other day, and the national lead, it's kind of thought that anywhere above 4%, 5% definitely, if she's got a national lead of 5%, then that's the election in the bag, because that should translate to the battleground states having enough in her favor as well. Like, a 5-point lead nationally will reflect a decent enough battleground state lead. And as you can see, battleground states on the averages at the moment, although some of the polls recently have been better for this, but these are averages over a greater time, have Wisconsin, her up 2, up 1 in Nevada, up 1 in Pennsylvania, even in North Carolina, down 1 in Georgia, and down 1 in Arizona. Now, I would suggest actually that Deb Trotter is saying North Carolina is looking pretty good, actually. Probably more likely she's going to get North Carolina than Georgia and Arizona. Actually, North Carolina is looking like an alternative pathway for her, perhaps. But yeah, when we look at the polls that are coming out at the moment, I mean, you look down here at all the latest presidential general election polls, and it's looking, pretty blue across those polls from September the 23rd onwards. Getting, Harris, plus, to differing degrees. Can she push that up enough to ensure a battleground state lead? I don't know. It's also interesting to look at the funding, and this can be, I think, or it is a reflection of enthusiasm as well, because the more enthusiasm you get, the more people are likely to donate for you, particularly if you're talking about small donations from the general public.
For a lot of political cycles, raised a lot of money, including for Vice President Harris, and I've never seen anything quite like this, as I will take you through. So yeah, let's start with the money race through the end of August. And we'll look at the blue, of course, of the Democrats, the red, the Republicans, and we've got a bunch of pieces here. This is the so-called hard money that the candidates raise. This is money raised by the party committees, Democratic National Committee, Republican National Committee, and you can see substantial outraising there. And I would say also it's important to note 42% of the donors to the Biden-Harris campaign were small donors under $200 versus 32% for President Trump. And that's actually a reversal of the past when Trump had more small donors than the Democrats did. But as
the Democrat small donor percentage is a bigger percentage of a bigger pie as well. So look at the size of that left-hand column. That is the amount of money that the presidential campaign funds have raised. And what's it, 285 million it comes from small donations versus 89 million for the Republicans. That is a sign. That is a reflection of enthusiasm.
You'll see again in a minute, the small donors are out in force. Important number to note is cash on hand, because that's what they got left to spend. And you can see again, the Democrats have a lead here in terms of cash on hand. One question you might ask is, how does this compare to other cycles? And you can see here the Biden-Harris campaign is on track to pass the last two cycles. These are inflation-adjusted numbers, so that makes them more significant to hit if they hit a record, which it looks like they will. But here's what's exceptional. Trump is way short of where he was last time, only raised about half as much money at this point as he had in 2020, and a bit more than he had back in 2016.
And obviously, Steve, as we move to your second chart, everything changed when President Biden stepped aside and made way for Vice President Harris, just sort of.
So the first thing to say is, of course, money doesn't necessarily make votes, right? So we have to be careful there. This will not necessarily translate into more votes for Harris. Another indication of the enthusiasm bump that the Democrats have got on the back of Harris, it comes here.
Energizing the base and sending donations through the roof.
This is the extraordinary thing, Willie, the most extraordinary thing I think almost any of us who've been involved in this for a while have seen. You can see here through the spring, Biden and Trump were kind of piddling along, to coin a phrase, raising a decent amount of money. But here's what happened. The president dropped out on July 21st. And in the month of July, so only with 10 days left in the month, $204 million raised by that then Harris campaign. And that carried over into August, $190 million versus 48 million down here. So we'll see what September brings us when those numbers come out. But an extraordinary outpouring of money raising. And here's the other thing that's exceptional. During his 6 months or so running, President Biden had 2 million unique donors, and that's a very reasonable number. Vice President Harris passed that number in 9 days. She passed the 2 million that Biden had raised throughout his campaign and is now up to about 4 million. And so if this has any relevance to populist support, this is an extraordinary outpouring of support.
Yeah, Kamala.
So that is a direct, I think, reflection of enthusiasm there. I think there's a really strong correlation between the two. For the first time ever, the DNC, so the Democratic National Committee, is sending dollars to every state Democratic Party in the country to bolster down ballot races. I was saying to Dave Trotter, like, the Democrats should just pump like $5 million into Alaska. Alaska is closing up, and it's going to have really cheap advertising there. You could get 3 electoral college votes and steal Alaska, because it is what last one was 5%. And it seems to be, tightening even more. So interesting. Anyway, Jamie Harrison here says, from the school board to the White House, the DNC is doing the work to elect Democrats to office at all levels of government. So they're going down ticket. They're going to like school boards and up from there. The Democrats are putting money right across the board to try and affect a much more dramatic change across the electoral landscape. Now, worth looking at another poll here. Samuel Perry says it's legitimately insane that 76% of Trump supporters say the word honest describes him very or fairly well. We are a gigantic natural experiment on the power of in-group loyalty, misinformation, and self-delusion on par with anything in the 1930s and 40s. Just to think that he is seen as honest, overwhelmingly seen as honest by his supporters, just shows you the delusion. I mean, it's incredible. It's also worth thinking that a quarter of his supporters think he's not honest. 1 in 4 of his voters are like, yeah, he's not honest, but I ain't voting for them. Yeah. So it can tell you a number of things. Now, one of the big problems, and I want to speak about this in my news bit that I'm going to keep separate, is the Democrats' struggles with the white working class unionized voter. Their kind of core originally would have been seen, or previously would have been seen as their core support.
Should set off sirens. All right, this is union households, this is Democratic margin in presidential election. It ain't what it used to be. You know, you go back to 1992, Bill Clinton won that union vote by 30 points. Hillary Clinton only won it by 12 points back in 2016. That was the lowest mark for a Democrat since 1984, Mondale versus Reagan. But look at where Kamala Harris is today. She's only leading by 9 points. That would be the worst Democratic performance in a generation, 10 points off the mark of Joe Biden, who of course won 4 years ago, was sort of that union guy, Union Joe, right? Won it by 19 points. She's 10 points off his mark, and the worst in a generation, if this in fact holds, Sarah.
It isn't.
And that is a real worry. Yeah. Now you could say that, okay, she's lost support there, but gained it here. And so there is a case of like taking from one and losing from another. But she really needs, I think, this vote. And we talk about October surprises. So when you have a November election, it's often the case that each side will bring out an October surprise. Now, I think the Republicans let out their October surprise yesterday. And there's been another one that's been growing, and I think strategically so. So the one that's been out the bag is that Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband, there was an article both in the Daily Mail and the New York Post, and the way they were written, these are hit articles. So these aren't just like, oh, we've just come across this and we're going to report this in a fair way and you know, be careful with the language we're using. They were hit articles on Doug Emhoff saying that he slapped an ex-girlfriend, and he's been seen as this new version of masculinity, which is like a softer version of masculinity. It's okay to be not this alpha male guy, and yet they are claiming this has happened. So that's something to keep an eye on, see whether that is true or not, and what the fallout from that might be. Interestingly, it hasn't quite leaked out into the mainstream media so much. I wonder whether they're just trying to work out whether the sources are bona fide or not, in a way that maybe the New York Post as a tabloid and the Daily Mail weren't too bothered with. So that's one to watch out for, and that could have a really serious effect on the campaign, because he's been used front and center in the campaign as this loving husband and the kind of supporter of Kamala Harris as the first gentleman. Okay, so there's that. And the second one, and possibly arguably more important in the ramifications, or could have much greater effect because it could have a wide-scale economic effect, is the longshoremen strikes taking place in the ports around the United States. And the guy, is it Daggett, the guy that's in charge of them? It's all about automation and wanting more money. But actually, these guys get paid quite a lot. And people are trying to work out what's going on here. You've got Adam Kinzinger has been raging about this, but of course he would be anti-union as a former Republican. That said, there are some people saying that you need to automate the ports. Like, it needs to happen. You see what happens abroad. If you want to compete with them, you need to catch up with what, let's say, China is doing. So there's this idea that you need automation, and B, there's this idea that they get paid an absolute ton of money as it is. So the longshoreman wages appear to be fairly good. There's a document I was looking at that showed you how many in the port, in this particular port, were paid at each different like wage strata, and I was like, holy crap, I need to get into working in a port. But it appears that I think the head of that union is a Trump supporter. That's how I understand it. And so this strike is timed very strategically. And if you hit the ports, as we know in COVID, ports are super important for keeping the entire supply chain of every single industry going in the United States. If you can't get stuff from abroad, right, you're screwed. And the ports are how you get stuff from abroad, ostensibly. This could have an absolutely phenomenal impact on the election. Watch out for the strikes in the coming weeks. Those strikes are some serious leverage. I mean, those longshoremen and that union has some incredible leverage. I'm a pro-union guy in general, but it's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out, and how much that will negatively affect the Harris Walz ticket. So there you go. And if you look at this stat, Trump has more working class support than any GOP presidential candidate in a generation. He's on track to have the best performance among union voters in 40 years. He's up 31 points among trade school graduates. Definitely a worry for the Democrats. Now, talking of polls, Rasmussen's been involved in some controversy. This is a right-wing, basically a Republican pollster. They've been caught scheming with the Trump campaign to deceive the American public. The implicates them in election law violations and fraud. So be careful of that. Some of the polls at the moment that have come out with much more favourable polls for Trump have been Rasmussen and Trafalgar, and these are both like avowedly right-wing polls. So you need to watch out, how they're doing things, what their methodology is, who's paying them, and what their interests in having skewed polls might be. I won't get into the Rasmussen thing other than to just give you this exclusive summary. Based on emails sent to us by a source, says American Muckrakers, allegedly Rasmussen poll is paid by non-profits for polls. Then Ted Carroll from Media Investors previews the results directly with Susie Wiles. So he and Dan Scavino, these guys who are running the Trump campaign, in violation of laws. And they've got the emails there and so on and so forth. So there could be some violations taking place from Rasmussen. They have already been taken out of the 538. So this is 538. They give you, this is one of the most prominent poll aggregators. It used to be run by Nate Silver. Then it was taken on, I think, by ABC News. Huge. Moments ago, what was I talking about? So here, Rasmussen reports polling has been removed from 538 national polling averages after leaked emails showed they shared polling data with Trump advisors before their release. Now, I was under the impression they'd already been taken off 538 for poor methodology previously. But anyway, 538 also asked Rasmussen reports about methodology on how they conduct the polling after leaked emails showed Trump advisors could be violating election laws for paying for favourable polling. Rasmussen reports for years have been associated with far-right conservative favourable outcomes. In 2024, these allegations took to new levels. Many pollsters are calling these allegations very serious and undermining, and that they undermine Rasmussen reports' credibility. Now, as far as endorsements go, and I talked about Republicans being given a permission structure to vote for and to endorse Kamala Harris and the Democrats and this big tent coalition. Well, there, as Brian Krasenstein said moments ago, former Republican Senator Jeff Flake endorsed Kamala Harris for president. Here's his full statement, quote, "I'm a conservative Republican who had the honor to serve my home state in Arizona in the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate for nearly 2 decades. I believe that America is a great country. I believe that our best days lie ahead. I want to support a candidate for president who believes the same. I believe that we don't have to agree on every issue or policy, but that we should use the political process created by our founders to debate and persuade, not disparage and demonize." Go back to what we heard earlier. "I want to support a candidate who understands that political opponents are our fellow citizens, the loyal opposition, as our parties once knew each other, not the enemy." Goes back to what I was talking about, this unity ticket rather than a divisive ticket. Having spent the past 3 years overseas as a US ambassador, so he was a Republican who was not the biggest fan of Trump and ended up becoming a US ambassador. I've seen up close that we have very real enemies abroad. We also have vital and indispensable allies. I want to support a presidential candidate who understands and appreciates the difference. So this is a kind of closeted, veiled attack on him Trump cozying up to dictators and not valuing allies enough. And you can think of Ukraine as a great example of that. I want to support a presidential candidate who understands and appreciates the difference. I believe in our constitutional system and in the rule of law. And I want to support a candidate who respects the will of the voters and who would never attempt to use the powers of the presidency to overturn an election and after having been turned out by the voters. Finally, I want to support a presidential candidate who seeks to unite our country rather than one who divides us, one who represents the ideals of a new generation of leadership based not on grievances of the past, but hope for the future. For all these reasons, I'll be supporting Kamala Harris for president and Tim Walz for vice president. I've served with Kamala in the US Senate. I've also served with Tim in the House of Representatives. I know them. I know firsthand of their fine character and love of country. I would encourage all Republicans who feel this way to do the same. After all, in times like these, there is nothing more conservative than putting country over party. So again, permission structure for other Republicans to follow suit. Another endorsement here, Dave Bautista, the actor and pretty big fella. Made my freedom heard. Voting early took me 20 minutes. No excuses. Freedom isn't something we just talk about. It's something we can act on. Do your part. Get out there and vote. Your voice matters. And this election's too important to sit out. Hashtag vote early. Hashtag love America again. So Dave Bautista, in lots of films of late, he has been. Interesting that he's espousing voting. God, he looks thin there. I haven't seen him look like that before. Espousing voting for Harris and Walz there. And yeah, just finally, I think Adam Kinzinger sums this up by saying crazy. Ben Wexler says, Harris, let's build 3 million new homes. Trump, let's do a national day of violence, as we heard earlier. Polls, yeah, statistically tied. Yeah, they're within a margin of error. When they have such wildly different visions of what America is and can be. It's just insane that half the country still thinks that that person is not just acceptable, but who they actually want to rule them, to run the country. Yeah, quite incredible. Anyway, that's enough from me. I do have all of those tabs at the top still to discuss with you, and I'll have to do that in a separate video. Otherwise, it'll be like a gajillion hours long. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.